Jim and I have no hard feelings that you didn't choose our villain in Savage Dragon number 10 to go up against the dragon. You chose that little SpongeBob SquarePants crab guy, and that's okay. Like, I don't have hard feelings about that.
I actually hear this a lot.
My name's Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
And the man of the hour today is Erik Larsen, creator of Savage Dragon, nearing or about to hit or just hit issue 250, depending on when the audience member is watching this thing. Congratulations on that, Erik.
Oh, thanks.
What are you working on right now?
Right now, I've got a splash page of a backup story for Savage Dragon 250. And I am marrying the lettering to the art, which is so that I can send, I like to send everything to image flattened as though the lettering was done on the boards, so that there's no concern of any weird ghosting with lettering or things not quite lining up. I'm super anal about this. And it's like way more than I need to be doing, but it's like I need to do it.
Does this come from experience? Did you get a bad result sometime?
No, I've just seen other comic books.
Yeah.
And just kind of aware how things can go wrong. And that was kind of one of the things. I put off having computer lettering in my book a really, really long time. It was lettered on the boards up through issue 187, which is pretty far along. Like
right.
Pretty much everybody had moved to doing computer lettering by that point. And I was just like, I can't do it. It saves me so much time having the lettering. And then it just got to a point where I was having the people who were lettering were like, I'm going to need an extra week on that. And I'm like, I don't have an extra week. It needs to go out. So crap. I guess I got to do this now. So,
Erik, can you walk us through an issue of the Savage Dragon's creative process?
I start drawing it, and then when I get to page 20, I stop.
Are you working from a script or notes, or what is your writing done in the art process?
I've got ideas in my head I have an idea of what I've done before. I know where I'm at this point. Occasionally, I'll jot down a few character things so I know like where I need to go with some stuff. But for the most part, I'm just going for it.
Is this how Jack Kirby worked? Is this something you picked up from Jack the King?
I think that is, but I'm not 100% sure on how. I mean, I never talked to Jack about that. It was the only times I met Jack, it was so noisy that I couldn't really get much of a, it's like, oh, it's San Diego Comic-Con. There's all this racket going on, and he's saying hello.
So you mentioned, you're going right to the boards and drawing. Whenever do you then generate a script that you send to your letterers? Yeah,
so I do a script and I'll do balloon placement, so that letterers know where things go. And then it goes from there.
To the colorist.
It doesn't. It gets colored at the same time that I feed the colorist as I'm inking pages. So usually by the time the letterer is delivering the lettering, generally speaking, it's all colored. Usually the colorist gets to it first. I sometimes will write some of it first so that the letterer can get a head start. The guy I've got right now, Perrin Delgado, is he's a little slower than Chris Iliopoulos was. Chris could turn out a book in like a number of hours, so I could just drop the whole thing at the end in his lap, and as long as I told him, hey, it's going to be done at this time, he could just turn it around fairly quickly. With Baron, it's a little bit slower than that. It usually needs a couple days. So sometimes I'll be like, I'll script sound effects for all these pages, and I'm going to give you the first couple pages of dialogue and then take it from there. So it can be fairly haphazard in terms of the way it comes together.
When you start your process, penciling each page, how many weeks is that? 3 weeks?
Oh, to pencil it?
To do the art, we'll say. To deliver to the next stage.
The thing is that it could very well be that I would pencil a page and then ink that page.
Sure.
So that it's done, and then and then moving on to the next page. I'm not necessarily penciling the whole issue out at once, and it can really vary a lot depending on how much I'm into it and where the process is and stuff like that. It's kind of, there are no rules in terms of that. It's just sort of where my head's at the moment. If I'm sitting here going, I'm in the groove, and I've got an idea of where I want to go with this story, I'll just pencil the whole thing, and I'll have 20 pages that I can just sit there and then pick away at inking for a while. Most of my penciling when I'm doing it at that stage is quite rough layouts, basic figure work, basically just blocking where figures go and stuff like that. And then as I'm inking it, I'll tighten pencils where I need to and then ink it. So it could be, I mean, there's just so many different ways that this can come together,
right,
depending on the particular issue.
Erik, what do you draw with? What are you inking with these days?
I use like the most standard possible #2 pencils, just your regular school pencils.
Some Ticonderogas.
Yeah. Those eraser on the end of it. I'd used harder leads before because they're not as smeary, but then I find that they drag on the paper so much that it's like, this is just slowing me down. And I mean, if I'm in a groove, I can block out 30 pages in a day.
Wow.
And just be like, all right, here it goes. I'm done. And then, of course that's nowhere near done. Those are really rough. But it's basic storytelling kind of stuff. But I don't get in the groove that much, so don't be too impressed.
Are you inking with standard inking tools like Hunt 102s and sable hair brushes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. I'll do straight lines with like either a Pentel rolling writer or just I had some other skinny ass pen around here somewhere that I'll use for straight line stuff. And then there's these Japanese markers that I got my hands on that I'll sometimes use here and there, just for no reason other than I've got these things and they seem to give me a smooth line, which is something like a brush. Because I hold a pencil like an idiot, it makes it a lot of tools that are supposed to work one way don't really work the way they ought to in my hands. So that can be a problem.
The pencil stance is definitely legendary, but another legendary piece of your career is that you started very, very early making comics as a boy, and this would be talked about a lot in like the editorial sections in the back of Savage Dragon. But one thing that I've been curious about was, are you sort of, when you start to get into the professional mindset to try to get work and become a professional, were you sort of from an era just before How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way? And if you were, how did you know like the paper sizes and all of that stuff?
I'm not before that.
Right.
How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way was out there. Before that, Charlton Comics had this tiny little guide on how to make comics that they put out, and I don't know how the hell I got a copy of that thing, but that was definitely circulated. Um, and it just gave you some of the technical, you need to use this size and you need to use that. But when I was a real little kid drawing comics, it was just 8.5 by 11 paper that was folded in half and stapled at the side. And I'm just drawing my own comics. Here we go. And you just go for it.
That stuff was so important. Like, we just did a video that we put out with talking about the first the Savage Dragon miniseries, and there are the editorials in the back that highlight, where your characters came from and the fact that you did those little type and paper comics. And you probably hear this a lot from cartoonists of my peer group, but highly influential. It was sort of like an adult telling us that you don't need 11 by 17 Bristol to make comics. Just go to your mom's typewriter, take some paper, fold it in half, make a freaking comic. And that was huge for us, man. So I want to thank you for that piece.
This is actually the first time I've heard that, so awesome.
That shocks me. That shocks me, Eric, because it comes up in conversation with a lot of my friends and stuff at the Comic Cons and stuff. Whenever hanging out with people behind the table, like those editorials were very important to us as we were growing up, trying to figure out how to make comics and stuff.
Well, good. I mean, that's really it. Is that there's no reason that everybody can't be making comics. They just go for it. You just got to do it. That's all.
Yeah, I think for a certain mentality, a certain kind of artist, it made people nervous to read that you need 11 by 17 Strathmore Bristol and a Hunt 102 pen and like all this like very specific stuff, because that was in the era as well, where people were like, well, I don't have the right paper to make comics. And it's like, yeah, well, did you see Complete Crumb Comics #2, where Robert Crumb's just using notebook? Like, you don't need anything special.
Yeah, no, that was cool. It's like those are the tools you need. A notebook. That's
Erik,
it.
did you grow up in the Bay Area?
I did not.
Oh.
I grew up several places. And I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I did not stay there for very long at all. And then from there, my family moved to Washington State, where I lived and stayed around there until about 4th grade. 5th grade, we moved down to Northern California, to a little town called Albion, which was around the Mendocino area, and that was where I started really drawing comics in earnest. I had done it before then a little bit, like one or two little things, and then but at that point, it was, we bought a plot of land with no house on it. So my parents just pulled it into essentially the woods and said, well, kids were home. And it was like, okay. And so we were kind of just camping for a little while there. And, and eventually we'd build a house there and what have you. But it was very much like, hey, you're on your own in terms of finding fun and things you're going to do and all that.
And did you have...
Yeah, so I just made comics.
Did you have access to comics? I think I've read that you had access to your dad's collection of comics early on. So did that prompt you to start making comics? The stuff that you were seeing?
I'm not even really sure where the bug hit or why it hit. I did not have access to much in the way of comics early on, other than his collection. Because, I just didn't. I wasn't able to buy comics. I just was this thing that I didn't have access to. And then somehow I managed to get a hold of one issue of the Incredible Hulk and one issue of Iron Man, and kind of that was the start of it. But there was just like a couple things that I had, and it's just like, here you go. And so when I was making my own comics, I didn't really even grasp that, oh, you're supposed to start with issue 1. So it was just like my first Savage Dragon comic was just the Dragon number 63, and it was just a dragon story where he did whatever. I mean, it was complete madness. You look back at it later and go, that doesn't make any sense. You don't know anything. You're just sitting there blindly just rampaging ahead as though you know what you're talking about. You have no understanding of the world at all. Like, yep.
That kind of makes sense for, a fourth grader that starts comics. I would be surprised if it made, if it made too much sense, or if it held up too well. That would be the shocking part.
Yeah, it was complete insanity. Like, you would just read it and go, why are they in dog sleds in the desert? That doesn't make any sense. And like, oh, I have no worldview. What do you know?
So, hold on real quick. Erik, how long did you live in the Mendocino County area?
I lived there up through 10th grade.
The reason I ask is because the real question is, Robert Crumb lived there. Did you ever, in some weird circumstance, know about him, hear about him, meet him? No?
Nope.
Okay. Had to get that out of the system because I would be thinking about it constantly.
And I'm actually living in an area right now that he used to live in. So I'm just kind of following him around. But yeah, at one point he was in the Upper Haight, which is where I live, in the Upper Haight-Ashburn in San Francisco.
Dig.
Erik, I think I read early on, whatever school you attended as a kid when you were making these comics, that it was sort of this progressive school where that was encouraged. Like, most of us have to hide our comics when we were in school. Is that true? Were you making comics sort of, I don't know, with the teacher's blessing or encouragement, or?
I mean, there was various times where I was in a situation where I was able to it was kind of okay. But for the most part, once I'm at school, I got to do school stuff. So it wasn't, I wasn't just completely left on my own to go nuts, much as I would have liked.
Early on, you don't have access to comics besides your dad's collection, but you're making comics. You've obviously responded to comics. Yeah. When do you start to transition into professional and making connections and getting out there and trying to make this a profession?
When I was about 19 is when that kind of came together. But I mean, it's a process, the whole thing of having this all come together. I mean, it just took a number of years doing a number of different things for a number of different. It just was this long, gradual, we're gonna get there kind of thing.
Let's talk graphic fantasy and how that came together.
In terms of getting comics, like, I didn't get comics for a while. And then 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I really got into what comics were being published, and I started actively buying comic books. So at that point, I did become really aware of, oh, these are Marvel comics, these are DC comics. I discovered all these artists that I didn't know existed before. So suddenly it was, I had known Herb Trimpe from my first Hulk comic that I'd had earlier. But then I discovered Jack Kirby, who was doing Commandy, the Last Boy on Earth. And then I discovered Gil Kane and Walt Simonson and all these guys who would sort of become my dudes, the guys whose work really influenced me. Frank Miller came around. John Byrne I'd followed from Charlton Comics. He was doing backups in E-Man, and I got into E-Man. And so all this stuff kind of came together, and then I was actively making my own comics kind of forever. The whole time I was sitting there making my own comic books. And then there was Charlton Comics was always kind of in the process of dying.
Right.
They never had anything that was a huge hit. I think E-Man was kind of a minor hit, but they could never really put something on the map that was a solid contender. At one point, they decided to do a comic book called Charlton Bullseye. Now, they had done kind of a fanzine called Charlton Bullseye earlier, but this was a comic book. And the idea was, we will publish your stuff, we will put it out there, but we're paying nothing. Like, you will get paid nothing. You'll get some copies of the book. You'll get to own your characters and keep the copyright, but you're not going to get paid a nickel for this. And and for me it was like, well, that's awesome, because I had this great comic book creator, I had character that I created, and I want to have that character be in print. So I wrote, penciled, inked a dragon story that was for that, and that was my intent. And then I sent it in. I just sent photocopies of it in to Charlton, and they basically responded by going, yeah, this book was canceled. We couldn't continue doing it. Sales weren't even good enough to do that. So they were really like on their way out. They were, but I'd had this story, and it was, okay, what am I going to do with this thing now? And then it became, my dad was teaching workshops at the time. He had bought a tabletop offset printing press.
Wow.
And so it was, I could make my own comic books. I could print my own comic books. I'm going to figure out how to do this. And then I had met a couple other artists through a comic book store in Bellingham, Washington, called which one was that? It was King Arthur's Bookshop. It was the comic store in the town at the time. So I'd met those guys, and together the three of us decided we're going to make a comic book. And I ended up having to kind of pitching in and helping those guys, because they weren't super solid in terms of inking, or they weren't really motivated enough to really get their work done. But I was more a driving force for that. And so I ended up inking all but 2 pages in our 72-page first issue of Graphic Fantasy. And it had 4 different stories. One was a 2-page gag thing, which not that hilarious. But and that was like the 2 pages I had nothing to do with. It was like, all right. But the other guys did their stories. So there's the Dragon, and there was Prism, and then there was Iron Hawk. And so each of us did our own story. I ended up inking both of theirs. And they had somebody who worked at the King Arthur shop, ended up lettering a bunch of the stuff, and we just came together and did this comic and self-published it in my living room. And it was a wreck, man. Like, the printing was so terrible, and really the printing press was not set up to print pages that were as big as the pages that needed to go through there in order to be comic book size. So I had to do all sorts of adjusting in the printing to make it work. So basically I would shove all the paper to one side so that I could print the top half of the color for the cover, and then I'd shove all the paper and everything to the other side so I could do the color for the logo. and it was just nothing lined up. And the color on the cover just looked awful. I think there were like 5 or 6 copies where it was lined up kind of reasonably well, but most of them were wildly off. And then the interiors, at that point we couldn't get a photocopier that would make everything as small as it needed to go. Everything was kind of incremental, where it's like you can reduce it by 75% or 65%, but it was like, I need this precise size. So we actually had to go to another printer and have them make smaller things so that we could scan in those smaller ones. And it was like just a pain in the ass to make it work. But we did manage to publish this horrible thing.
This sounds amazing, and I have several questions
Yes.
wrapped up with this.
So we had that local store, King Arthur's Bookshop in Bellingham, sold a shit ton of this fanzine. But really, we wanted it for a convention. So we were up all night the day before that convention because we were sure that it was going to be the hit of the convention, and that was what it was all about, was getting that thing and going there. So we were just trying to pawn off the ink was still wet. It was like this sticky, horrible thing that we were trying to sell to people, and we hadn't trimmed it, so it was really ragged looking. And yeah, our first bunch that got out into the wild that were sold at that convention are really different looking than some of the later ones, because the later ones we would just come in and trim all the sides so it was really comic book size. The first one was kind of like a folded up newspaper where everything was just really not in good shape.
That's amazing. Is that like 1984, 85, 83, somewhere around there?
82.
Okay.
Was the principal distribution for graphic fantasy, was it King Arthur's and the occasional comic? So you weren't hooked up with Phil Suling and Seagate or anything like that?
Nothing like that. It never worked. And we weren't at any point. We did that. We took out ads in a couple of the Comics Buyer's Guide, which existed at the time. And we sent review copies out to Comics Journal and Comics Reader and whoever existed in any form. A couple of the people did write reviews of it in their fanzines, and so the word got out a little bit, and a few people did buy it through the mail. And one of those people was Gary Carlson, who was starting up his own comic book called Megaton out of Chicago, and he ended up connected. So that was my first professional work, was for Gary on Megaton. We co-created Vanguard, and that was it for me. And at that point, it was just getting somewhere was that process of, okay, now I have something that I can show to the next guy and something I can show to the next guy, and just kind of build it from there.
I'm excited to get to the Gary Carlson stuff with Megaton. We're fortunate enough to have those issues handy. But just one more nerdy question about graphic fantasy. For my own edification, I wonder, did you do the color separations for this? Like with cutting Zipatone for the yellow and blue plates?
There was terrible mores on it. I didn't think, these should be at slightly different angles from each other.
Right.
So it looks absolutely awful.
That's so cool, because, we know you as penciler, writer, inker, but color separator, that's awesome.
No, I've done everything. I've done literally every job that I could do in comics at this point. It's like, I've been the publisher. I've physically printed comics and stapled them, and kind of every part of it along the way, and which has all made it so much easier for me when it comes to, well, how do you do this stuff? It's like, well, I've done all of it, so let me get my hands dirty here and actually do what needs to be done.
Did Gary Carlson did he defer to your expertise for the most part, or did he have some skin in the game? He did some stuff in his day before Megaton.
This was the first thing he had published, so I mean, I was pretty full of myself early on, much more than I should have been given my talent at the time. And I really kind of did manage to push my way around in terms of getting what I wanted really early on. Which, I mean, I had no right telling anybody how to do anything, but it worked out all right, I guess. So,
what did you want with Megaton?
I just mostly, more than anything, I wanted these comics to come out more frequently, and he wanted to do it as a anthology book with a bunch of different features, which was fine. But he was having a real tough time getting artists to get stuff done, whereas I really wanted to produce a body of work. So kind of what ended up happening was I would end up just not doing stuff for months at a time while he was trying to get other people to do stuff. Meanwhile, I'm saying, just have me do all of them. I don't understand why there's any hesitation. You've got a guy here who will do the work, but he wanted, and he's later on was like, yeah, I probably should have had you do everything, because you were the one guy who, when I needed something done, would actually produce and get it done. So I don't know what I was thinking.
Just knowing your career, I see a pattern developing, because you're the guy who gets everything done on Graphic Fantasy. You're the dude who gets everything done on Megaton, and then there's Image Zero that happens later, and you're the guy who got your thing done, sitting there waiting for everybody else to get their parts, and then their part is all pinups.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's frustrating, because I'm sitting here on Image United, going, here I'll draw all of it. I'll do pencils for the whole thing. I'll do rough pencils. It'll be placement for all the figures, and you guys can just come in there and fill in your guys. Let's just go. And I ended up penciling up through the 5th issue. There was never a plot for the 6th issue, so it's like, I'm trying to get us over the finish line, guys. Could you toss me a bone here? At least finish the damn thing. So it's all of this has been a source of frustration my entire life. It's like, can we just get it done, for crying out loud, guys?
Erik, I don't want to jump around too much in time, but so many of the Image founders sort of developed a studio, with a lot of people working for them and doing, spin-off books and taking over books. And you did a little bit, you had Super Patriot and Deadly Duo and Freak Force, so you did that a little bit. Did you shy away from it because of what you're describing right now, that people don't keep up and it's a hassle to get everybody to do their part? Is that part of why you didn't stick with that?
That's part of it, yeah. And also, I didn't see any advantage to taking on a studio and paying for a space when I wasn't sure, and nobody was sure, where this industry was going to be down the road. It's like, all right, what's going to happen later on? Am I gonna sit there and go, hey, everything dried up. What the hell? I'm paying for this huge space. What are we doing here? I didn't want to be in that position where I've obligated myself of being, oh, I've got to make $12,000 a month just to cover my nut. It's like I can't have that. I can't count on other people. Is basically what I've learned in this process. Is, you can count on yourself. You're going to get your shit together. You're going to do it. But yeah, I can't make sure. I don't know that other people are gonna. So, you do what you can.
I found that's for most successful cartoonists in the game, they have the same mentality, and that goes all the way down to promotion of the book once it's out. Like, you can't necessarily count on an overextended publicity department, which is usually one or two people at a publisher to get the word out. So it's like it's all incumbent upon you. Which, if you're a DIY kind of person, that's no problem. I do have another Megaton question because I'm curious. Some really good people, Butch Geis, Angel Medina, you, a lot of good people came through that little system. Did you headhunt these other artists? Does Gary have a great eye?
I think Gary has a great eye, because I didn't know any of these guys at all. So. He just found there was nobody in my area. It was I was really, I'm on my own. There were the other guys that I did stuff with on Megaton. They really are on a graphic fantasy. They really weren't bound for doing comics. They didn't have the drive. And they didn't have. I mean, I helped them quite a bit when I was inking the stuff, and it just wasn't. It's not there. It's not. You can see people's work and go, yeah, this isn't it.
Yeah, and sometimes you can work and get to a certain level, but it's a mentality. Like, you have to have a discipline to actually do the freaking work, and then maybe you'll get there or something. But did Gary also publish? There was that Berserker comic, and I remember seeing those pinups from a super young Erik Larsen and a super young Rob Liefeld. Where did those appear first? Because I have reprints of that stuff.
Berserker appeared first in Megaton.
Okay.
So that's where that came about, and that was that. If you saw something later, that was supposed to be a spin-off. But he, at one point, had aspirations to expand beyond his first book. And it didn't quite come together because the field at that point was contracting again. There had been the black and white boom, which Gary kind of missed. He was a little before that. And then later on, he was thinking, well, I'll do color books, and this will be it. I'm going to do full-on things. And by that point, the numbers weren't there for what he wanted to do. And so it just kind of ended.
Erik, you mentioned the black and white explosion. That is something that, as a reader, I came to after the fact. Like, historically,
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me. I wonder if you have any anecdotes or memories of that time period. I don't know, observing the turtles, watching things expand and then contract. I don't know. What was your experience, from your perspective, like during that period?
That was real early on, and I was trying to break in. I'd actually because of doing the graphic fantasy thing, I ended up making pals with a couple different people who ended up basically being pen pals for a number of years, and we would keep in touch with each other. I had a friend named Michael Dooney, who I didn't meet for years, but I met him, just through the mail, and we kind of showed each other the stuff that we were working on, and it was a lot of back and forth. At one point, he had put together a thing called Gizmo Sprocket, which was his own character, and he was going to self-publish his own book with that. And so he, when Eastman and Laird had taken out their first ad in like the Comics Buyer's Guide, he contacted them and said, "Hey, you guys want to trade? I'm doing my own comic. You're doing your own comic. We could trade copies." And they were like, "Okay, cool, but we both want one." So they sent him 2 copies of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sent one to me because he was like, "What am I going to do with 2 of these things?"
I was looking in those boxes back there, wondering if there was a #1.
There isn't, because my house burned down.
Oh, that sucks so much. Yeah, that's another one of those major bummers, because if I'm not mistaken, some of those comics from when you were a kid are no longer with us because of that blaze as well.
And my dad had given me his collection. So everything that he had, which was 650 plus Golden Age comics going back to, real early. So he had most of the EC comics. He bought comics until they stopped making comics for him, basically. He had started earlier on and was getting Captain Marvel adventures and various weird comics that he was into. He was into some comic called Blue Bolt for some reason, which I just thought was terrible. It just was. It's like, hey, he's an athlete. Is he going to make that jump? Yes. It sucks. But he somehow thought that was cool stuff. And then, big into the Marvel, as in Fawcett's Marvel stuff. So we had a bunch of issues of Mary Marvel, huge amount of Captain Marvel adventures, and not so much Captain Marvel Jr. He wasn't really into that, but Marvel Family. And then it was all over the place. Basil Wolferton's Powerhouse Pepper, early Mad magazine, Mad when it was a comic book. So we just, I grew up with those. So we had tons and tons of those. But anyway.
That's an amazing pedigree, man.
Yeah, I'll say.
Victims of fire.
What of those stacks did you gravitate toward most? The EC or?
No, the Fawcett stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was what I was into, and he had there was some early Batman stuff and early Superman, and just not a huge amount of those, but he was super into the Fawcett stuff, and I just was like, all right. I like this. He had a bunch of the Carl Barks Duck stuff, so there was a bunch of those. A lot of funny comics, Mopsy and Henry, and just Little Lulu. It was really kind of all over the map. And it's interesting to read those old comics because the people putting them together were really just under this impression that people just like comics, period. So it doesn't really matter. We'll put whatever the hell we want to within a comic book, and you just take it, So you would get a comic like Captain Marvel Adventures, and then there would, as you're reading through the comic, there would be, and here's a war story that we had sitting around, and here's some funnies that we did. And there would always be recurring comics that would just be running as backups in these things. And that, part of that became my love of having there just be extra shit in the back of a comic book, which I was like, this is awesome. There's all this bonus material, and it's not necessarily anything. It's just, you like comics, we're making comics, here you go.
As you just rattled off those names, I was just thinking about all of that kind of in relation to Savage Dragon in a way, and how you sort of evolved and changed and would sort of start to bring in a new element here or try a different storytelling format there. And it all, to me, it all makes sense when you rattle off the list of comics that you sort of probably read and reread a ton growing up.
It's all part of my DNA to some degree. It's all in the mix there somewhere.
Again, Eric, I apologize for us jumping around as much as we are, or maybe to the viewers at home.
It's organized chaos, however you want to do it.
But looking at some of your Savage Dragon comics, preparing for this, it is amazing all the back matter. From the letters page, which, I mean, how many other letters pages even still exist in comics? But to the extra comics and bonus stuff that you put in there, it feels like you're building a comic book. And the reason I bring this up is when you look around and see other comic books today, does it confuse you that they don't look, like they're not satisfying in a lot of ways as single issues? Savage Dragon feels like that's a complete unit. You get your month's dose, and there's extras and, connection to fan and the letters columns. What do you think of like the standard comic book format today, though? If you look at new comics, any thoughts on where we're at as an industry, as publishers, as makers?
Well, I find modern comics pretty frustrating. Just because they're clearly being written so that they can be collected later on. But it's like, well, why are you putting these out as single issues at this point? Because a lot of times they don't even make sense as single issues. It's not a complete thought. It's certainly not a complete story. There's not a lot of thought being put into making it a satisfying thing as a unit. And it's like, I don't know of many other things that are sold that way, where you're just getting a piece of something and not a full thing. It's very strange to me.
Are there any books right now coming out that you look forward to that you think do give that full experience?
I am. I hate to be that guy, but at this point, I don't read any new comics. And there was a period there where I was like, I got to get back into this stuff. I'm going to read the Fantastic Four, and I'm going to read Spider-Man. I'm going to read the Hulk, and I'm going to read this and that. And it just was like, I don't like these, and I'm not being entertained. And I came here to be entertained.
Dig. Speaking of, Batman, Marvel, DC, let's take it back a little bit. Megaton, post Megaton. I guess DC is probably the next part of the trajectory.
The next step was AC Comics, America.
Oh, right.
So Bill Black and his motley crew doing stuff, and that was really just a period of figuring out stuff. I had my strengths. There were things that I was good at, and mostly that was characters kicking the shit out of each other. So I had a lot of that kind of, my Gil Kane and my Jack Kirby were in play there, and I had that kind of explosive quality to my work. But when it came to, hey, you got a few pages of characters that are just interacting with one another, I really did not have that going on at all. And so AC Comics doing Sentinels of Justice and whatever I could do over there, that just kind of eased me through some of that stuff. There was some real awkward learning going on there. Then I, fought my way through that a little bit. But just as time went on, there was just more and more stuff that I was getting under my belt. And then I met Jim Shooter at a comic book convention in Chicago. And at that point, he gave me my first real break, which was doing a Hulk versus Thor story. And that just kind of came about where he was looking through my stuff and said, hey, do you want to do a story for Marvel Fanfare? Which I I didn't know meant, hey, would you like to do an inventory story that's going to sit around for years before this eventually sees print? At the time, I thought, wow, I went from nothing to being a fan favorite. This is amazing. So that was like a cool thing, I said yes. So he said, first let me start this conversation over. All right. He said, look through the pages and go, so you're a professional now? And I said, yes. And then he said, would you like to do a story for Marvel Fanfare? And I said, sure, let's plot it at the convention. And he was a little taken back, and he was like, all right. And so we made a plan to sit down and talk through the beats of a story. And when it came to that, I was like, it always frustrated me that the Hulk and Thor would always have these fights, but they would always be a draw. There was never any conclusive, like, who's the winner in this battle. So we talked through a Hulk versus Thor story where there was a definitive winner. And it was like, oh, this would be this awesome thing. And then I went home and drew this thing out, and then I had the best samples in the world, because it was all just two guys kicking the shit out of each other for 22 pages. And at that point, it was like, let me show these samples to everybody. And I had at a convention in Vancouver Island, a town called Victoria. They had a little convention there, and I met a couple of people there who I met Mark Evanier, who's doing DN Agents over at Eclipse Comics at the time, and that was sort of a break there. Was okay, now I can go and do this. And all the time I keep sending samples to everybody, so that there was this constant, hey, I just did this story. What do you think? Hey, I just did that. So I did a story for him. He put me on the DN Agents, and I started in on that. And then in the midst of that, I got a call from Jim Salicrup, who had me do an issue of Spider-Man. It was just a fill-in. They just needed a warm body. So I did an issue of Spider-Man. And then at some point I had met Mike Gold, and Mike Gold was really keen to have me do, he wanted me on the Teen Titans. And so he was really pushing everybody there to put me on the Teen Titans. This is going to be your guy. He found something there that he liked. And I drew a Nightwing story, and I drew 2 issues of Teen Titans Spotlight. I was just kind of the fill-in guy for a little bit. He would just get me stuff. And it was, they need somebody to do a fill-in on Adventures of Superman. Fine, I did a fill-in there. So I was just kind of jumping around doing this and that. And I did an issue of Teen Titans, and it wasn't with Marv. It was, he had a different writer filled in on that one. And Marv just wasn't having me as the Teen Titans dude. He just wasn't on board with that. He had actually written the issue of Adventures of Superman that I had drawn, and I think he got to see some of my real deficiencies. And it was like, this guy's not ready to do anything. I don't see what other people are seeing. I did, especially there's a big close-up of Superman's face, and they're just looking exhausted. And he just had this real dog-faced, long Sylvester Stallone kind of head. It was like, that doesn't even look like Superman. And why are you doing a full-page picture of like a regular-looking dude? That's not a cool splash. So he just wasn't having it. And then what ended up happening is it looked like Steve Lytle was struggling on the Doom Patrol. Like he wasn't. They were a little unsure if he was going to make it. So what they did is they thought, well, let's plot this Doom Patrol meets the Suicide Squad story, and then I forgot the Outsiders in there, but whatever. I mean, it's like I did a bunch of fill-ins for a bunch of things. And each time along the way, I would just be an idiot. But
when do you think things really started clicking to where you found solid footing for yourself?
It would have been on the Doom Patrol. It's kind of late in the run on the Doom Patrol was like, all right, I'm actually feeling comfortable when I'm drawing characters sitting around a table talking with each other. This isn't terrible. I think DN Agents had its moments. There were some pieces in there where you go, okay, this is getting there. The Doom Patrol Suicide Squad story was kind of done as a failsafe, like, okay, we can slot this in if Steve Lytle blows it. But then Steve Lytle did kind of blow it, and at that point they were like, we actually need somebody to take over this book. So they just gave me the book and ended up putting out the Doom Patrol Suicide Squad thing as a one-shot. But for whatever reason, I really thought I had it going on, and for whatever reason, editorial kind of just said, all right, along the way, which, doesn't make any sense that anybody would listen to me at that point, but they seemed to. So it was like I said, I did a couple issues of The Outsiders. Those were done as full script, and so it's like it wasn't plot style, which I had been working with most of the time was plot style and stuff. So here I got this full script, and the writer had broken it down so that every page was a 5-panel page, and I was sitting there reading it through it, going, why is this? He's got villains showing up for the first time, and they're in a tiny panel, the same as everything else. And so I just was like, I'm just going to put all the pages, all the panels will be in the right order, all the dialogue will work, but I'm going to move shit around so that this is going to be a 9-panel page so that I can give the villains a full page shot when they show up. And I'm going to move this from here and this from there. And they just kind of let me. And it was fine. Nobody said at any point, what are you doing? It was just, this is totally okay. And looking back on it, it's kind of unbelievable to me that they did that, that they were just let this kid do whatever. And when I was working on the Doom Patrol itself, there were times in there where I was like, this story doesn't make any sense. There was a part in one of those issues, Robot Man's brain was in a tube being held by this villain, and somehow he was able to use his brain power to run this spaceship. And I was like, this just sucks. He's not like a super brainy guy. He's Robot Man. He shouldn't be able to do this. This doesn't make any damn sense at all. And so I don't even know if I talked with the editor or what, but I just had the bad guy just break the tube on like page 2 so that his brain was just scattered across the floor in the little robot box it was in. And then I had it so that I made the spaceship go out of control some other way. I'll come up with my own way to have the thing happen that you need to have happen so that your story makes sense. But I'm not going to do this thing which I don't think works very well. And they just let me. Nobody said anything at any point like, don't do that. What are you doing? That's my story, damn it. None of that came about. I remember like the last issue going, okay, this is a continued story. It's going to another artist for the next part of it. I guess I'm just going to stick with the plot this time. And the editor said, why start now? All right. um, so I don't know. I'm much more of a troublemaker than I than I should have been. You know, I mean, in retrospect, it was like, why are they letting me do this? I don't get it, but it worked out all right. So it got weird when, when I go to Marvel and I'm sitting there going, I'm just going to change this. Then you got to change this back or we'll have somebody do it. It's like, what the hell? There are panels in some of my Amazing Spider-Man stuff where it's like, I didn't draw that at all. That's not even me. It's just some other random guy trying to draw like me for that panel because, I went off the reservation and did whatever the hell I wanted to. And they're like, nope. Sorry, buddy.
Erik, when you took over Amazing Spider-Man, it's following Todd McFarlane. Was there a lot of like backlash from fans? And if so, like how did you manage that? Did you struggle with that at all? Because you had a long run on that book, following him.
I kind of try to ease my way into it. I knew when I followed Steve Lytle on the Doom Patrol, I was ballsy enough to just go, I'm just doing my own thing, and you guys can catch up to what I'm doing. And the reaction from fans was super negative. So when it came to Spider-Man, I'm sitting there going, well, Todd McFarlane is 100 times the fan favorite that Steve Lytle had ever been and would ever be. I better ease into it. But it also helped that both of us have kind of a cartoony undercurrent there. We both have a little bit of Michael Golden in the mix, where we're both looking at the NAM, going, "Oh, this is cool. Let's do that." So when I was still doing my cartoony stuff, but going, okay, well, Todd's doing funky panel borders. I'll do funky panel borders, and Todd's doing way too much webbing. I'll do way too much webbing. So I tried to ease into it. I wasn't. The reaction seemed to be fine. People didn't lose their minds. There were a few vocal critics who were really outraged that this would go on. But it's it's like Marvel wasn't in the habit of canceling popular titles just because a creator moved on. It was like, look, this keeps going. Even though the guy you like is no longer there, so deal with it.
In a lot of the early interviews that we were able to get our hands on, and they were all pretty much post-Image Comics, essentially. Maybe right around when you left for Image, these interviews sprung up. But a lot of frustration with the writer of your collaborations with the big two was expressed a lot in there. So
yeah, I'm just, I don't know what it is. I'm a tough guy to work with. I just am. And I don't mean to be a dick, but it's just like I just kind of felt like I figured all this shit out. I want to do the stuff that I figured out that works. What are you doing to me?
I always think there's a certain profile that goes with cartoonists, and I think there's a difference between cartoonists and pencilers. And what you're describing, Erik, fits my cartoonist profile perfectly. I feel the same way. I tend to do everything myself, and it's, nothing against collaboration, but I want to do what I want to do. I want to draw the stories that I want to tell, and so I find that a lot with cartoonists that tend to write and draw their own stuff. I don't know if I would call them troublemakers, but it does seem to be something a lot of cartoonists, I think, have in common.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us just kind of internalized everything and just go. I've read so many comics and I've analyzed all this stuff so much over the years that I feel like I've got it figured out. Even if we don't necessarily have it figured out, you kind of approach it like, oh, I know what I'm doing.
There's a part of me that wants to skip ahead with this train of thought and actually talk about when you were the publisher of Image Comics, because you have to be a little bit of some kind of a team player in that capacity. You know, you other moving parts are required for that gig. So, what was it like being the publisher of Image Comics and having to rely on others when you were used to doing sort of everything yourself? How did you adjust your mind to perhaps disappointment?
Well, it's a different kind of gig, I think, than most publishing gigs are. In many respects, it's a very different animal from being the publisher at DC or being the publisher because everybody owns their own stuff. So there's really just a very limited amount of control that any publisher can have, other than saying, yes, we're going to do this, or no, we're not going to do that. So, I can't really force my will on somebody else's book. It's like this is their thing. This isn't my thing. So if somebody wants to do something that I think is unwise or not very good, ultimately it's their book. So there's really just a limited amount of stuff that I could do in that regard.
So was the gig pretty much just like, yes, we'll publish this, no, we won't? And would you give a little game to a person that you saw making a perhaps unwise move, maybe?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. There was stuff along the line where I'm like, this logo is terrible, or this title of your book is terrible. The Luna brothers came in, and their book had been approved with Jim Valentino, but their book at the time was called Heroine, because she was the heroine. But the problem with the title Heroine is there's also this drug called heroin, and yes, they're spelled different, but count on everybody being the smartest knife in the drawer or sharpest knife in the drawer. So it's like, what, let's call this something else that doesn't sound like that, just on the off chance that somebody's going to think that this book is going to be about something which it isn't about. And so it became, they retitled it Ultra, which I think was in the long run a better title for them than Heroine would have been. So some of it's trying to talk people off the ledge. Some of it is trying to give some sage fatherly advice from I've done this before, let me tell you, kind of stuff. There's a little bit of that. In some cases, it was like, your logo is not very good. I think your logo would be better, would be more noticeable. A lot of it was that kind of hands-on art direction type stuff, where I'm basically saying to people, hey, let's try this and try that. I think this is going to work better for you if we go and do it and do things this way, because it's amazing how self-destructive some people are, or just the decisions some people can make that you just go, what are you doing? And I see this all the time, where I'll see books come out where somebody is like, hey, I'm a great artist and I do great stuff, but I'm going to have somebody else do covers for me. Why are you doing this? this guy is not doing better covers than you would do, and it's not representing what your book is. And there's, all these things that are now going against what you're trying to accomplish. I don't want to single people out, but there's definitely things where I'm going, all your covers look the same. You just did 6 covers in a row that are all white covers with a logo. People aren't going to come in the store and go, oh, that's the new issue of that book. They're going to come in the store and say, I've got that issue, And it's some of that is just things I would think would be super obvious that don't seem to be super obvious. Have a title of your book which readers can pronounce. Do that. Just have that as a thing. Have a logo that somebody can read. How about that? Just use a typeface that's legible. How about that? Something, if you can see that from across the room, that's a positive thing. That's good. Do that. And a lot of the stuff I would think is common sense isn't. It really isn't. Like, what are you thinking?
That's so funny. I think so many cartoonists are self-taught, and it is weird the deficiencies that different people have. It seems like, how could you miss this one little piece? But we do. So, it seems like everybody...
Well, yeah. And people would just have their things where they're really... Well, the thing I'm excited about is fishing, and I want to do a fishing comic, and this is be awesome. It's like, yeah, but you've been doing Spider-Man for 3 years now, and now you want to do a fishing comic. I don't know that we can count on the Spider-Man readers following you over to your fishing comic.
Erik, it sounds like you have somebody in mind. Want to name some names?
Is this Mark Bagley trying to do some fishing comics?
No, that's not. I mean, that's an extreme example.
Erik, I wonder. I remember when you took over publisher, and it seemed like comics as a whole, the industry was in this very low down cycle. What was there a necessity there? Were you guys looking at Image? Like Image was in trouble and needed to try something new? What's the process of changing a publisher at Image? And, were there...
Well, in this particular case, what had gone on is Jim Valentino was running the show, and Jim really had some strong connections in the indie crowd. And so he had brought in a lot of indie guys. And he wasn't getting a lot of the more mainstream Marvel, DC Comics guys to come over, because mostly those people weren't. He didn't have a real strong connection with a lot of those people, and at the same time, I kept hearing rumblings from people going, "I'd like to pitch a book at Image, but getting rejected by Jim Valentino would be too much of a blow to my ego." It's like, wow, that's harsh. That's probably not something I should be saying on a podcast, but and it's like I could see that was something where our comics were kind of becoming more weird and fringe, and also the audience wasn't necessarily receptive to all of it. And so there were a lot of comics that were starting up and then just dying really quick. And then you'd have these stories which would never get finished, and they were just left hanging forever. And just me being the anal guy that I am, I was just like, I must have these things resolved. I can't let everything be hanging here. It's driving me crazy. So I just kind of muscled my way in there. And it was a dick move on my part, but I felt like this ship needs to be righted. We're going towards the rocks, and if we don't get going on a course which is putting out stronger books and having more hands-on art direction, we could be in real trouble here.
What were some of the first books that you brought into the fold?
I don't remember.
Well, here's something that you may remember. I'm also curious about what kind of sacrifices you had to make with your own comics making practice whenever you took on the responsibilities of publisher. Did Dragon start coming out a little less frequently?
Yeah. Really, it took a huge hit. There was a couple years there where I put out like 2 issues over the course of a year, and it's like that. It sucked for me. It sucked for whoever was reading the book at the time, and I was not. I didn't get in this to be an administrator or to be an editor and to be a guy who is talking people into doing comics or whatever. So, after a few years of kind of doing that, but I thought the company was kind of going in the right direction. I thought things were all right. And Erik Stevenson was certainly up for the task. So, actually, Robert Kirkman kind of talked me into just giving it up. And he was just like, "Hey, man, we need to get your comic out more." It's like, "Yeah, you're right." And Erik Stevenson seems to know what he's doing, and it seems like you're not being as effective as a creator or as a publisher at this point. Why not just go back to doing your comic? And so I decided to do that, but I still, at that point, still came into the office and just was doing as a drawing board there. And I just came in and drew comics while the rest of the company was doing other stuff.
How much input do you guys, the image partners, have in the direction of image? Or are you, talking to Erik Stevenson? Are you do you guys get ideas and say, hey, why don't we try, make this change or that change? Or are you pretty hands off and it's up to?
Yeah, we're relatively hands off. There are certainly times where we'll, as a group, go, hey, we should really be doing this. We should really be doing that. And that does happen sometimes where we'll get together and be like, you know what? We all miss the shared universe. Let's go back and do more shared Image Comics universe stuff and do more superheroes again. And we're all going to do it, damn it. And it's like, yeah, all right. I'll believe that when I see it. But so there's some of that, but in terms of when books are pitched, we don't see that. We don't see that at all. It's just books are pitched to Erik Stevenson, and Erik Stevenson decides what we're going to publish and what we're not going to publish.
Are you guys looking at things like business ideas in terms of distribution? And, the direct market seems like it's been fragile for a long time. There's often talk about how do we get comics in the hands of new readers. Is that something that you all are, brainstorm and kick around ideas? And
that would be more what's going on with Erik and what's going on and what he is capable of doing with the comic book company. So we're exclusive to Diamond at this point, so we can't really just be going too crazy off on our own. So those are just conversation that he's having with other stuff. And all of us we all own our own characters, and we all are living our own lives and doing our own stuff. So there's sort of a limited amount of things that we can really do in that regard.
Yeah, I wonder if those ideas come up with you, because you've done some really interesting issues of Savage Dragon. There was one that was reformatted. I think it ran in Comic Shop News, where it was sort of more like a comic strip, even though it also ran as an issue. There was one that was a digest-sized issue. These are pretty interesting things that I don't see any other cartoonist doing.
It's fun. They're not necessarily worth doing in terms of making a living.
I hate to hear that.
Like I keep having these crazy ideas. I'm like, oh, I should do it. I want to do a treasury edition. It's like, oh, that sounds awesome, until the audience doesn't show up for that, or the retailers decide, yeah, you know what, we're not buying that.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, well, I just talked a bunch of people into doing this with me, and now nobody's getting anything out of this deal, and that kind of sucks for everybody involved. So, love to do it. Would love to experiment a lot more and try more crazy things out. But especially if you're talking people into doing stuff.
Sure.
You got to have a certain amount of just responsibility to other people in the team that are doing stuff with you. It's like I did those next issue project things.
I did one of those with you.
Those are fun as hell, but those books sold so bad. And it's like, oh man, I really want everybody to be getting a paycheck doing this. And that's just not going to happen. They just made zero money.
It just isn't Savage Dragon versus Megaton Man era anymore, man.
I know it. It bothers me, because I love all that, the craziness of comics, and I like doing all sorts of different things and trying different things out, and a lot of times it is like, I just want to do this because I want to do this. And it may get to a point at some point where I may just be going, I'm just going to be publishing a few comics on my own that I'm just publishing on my own. And I'll just sell them at comic book conventions. And, you can buy them there. And that'll be where those are distributed, so that I can do my weird offshoot stuff and not have these various other hurdles that are in the way.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because that speaks to my own heart. I enjoy some of these different formats and trying different things, and I look forward to whatever experiments you come up with along those lines.
I wish everybody was more receptive to that stuff. I know that when I do crazy things, it's like people buy the stuff at shows,
right?
But it's like I did a Mr. Glum doll, and it's like, hey, this thing is cool as hell, but retailers weren't sitting there going, oh, we got to stock this thing. But it's like, I go to a convention and I'll sell a pile of those things. But then to get stores to order one of them is just like pulling teeth. So it's like, how do I get this to work? Because seems to be a real disconnect between what stores order and what fans want or are willing to buy directly from a person, I guess.
Yeah, I can understand that. The size of the catalog retailers have to go through, I imagine it's hard for them to think of, like, what is this figure going to look like in 3 months? Like, I can see the challenges from their side too.
Oh yeah. I absolutely can empathize with absolutely every part of that, because it's a bitch to try and figure out, well, can I count on somebody coming in here to buy this thing? I would hope so, but I don't know that I can. So I'm gonna order very conservatively on this, and this. And it's like, I mean, at this point, most Savage Dragon comics are going directly into people's savers. And so it's really hard for me to be able to grow my audience when I'm not visible. I'm not on the racks at all in many, many, many circumstances. My comic doesn't exist in this store other than these 8 people who want it and are getting it every month in their saver. You
That's
know?
such a challenge. Yeah, we do know, and it is such a challenge, and I wonder about that and how you strategize around it. I think of Dave Sim, and I wonder if you've talked to him. Like I was trying to think of parallels to Savage Dragon, and of course Dave Sim with Cerebus doing 300 issues. He would do things like those Cerebus reprints, like bi-weekly Swords of Cerebus or whatever. I think is a way to just get new readers maybe. But I don't. I mean, obviously, I have no ideas on how to do that. But what a challenge for you!
It's tough. I do the black and white Savage Dragon archives just because those things are dirt cheap in terms of somebody I just want to read the issues. How can I read it? It's like here's 25 issues, and it's $20. And it's like the printing is really inexpensive, and every aspect of this is inexpensive. If I was to do those books in color, they gotta cost essentially twice that much. And it's like, are there going to be enough people that are going to willing to throw down that kind of dough to buy these things? Maybe. Are stores going to stock these things? I don't know, and it becomes a real frustration because you don't want to be starting some other reprint format just to be okay. Well, we've collected up. We did 2 volumes and now it's done because the sales weren't high enough to be able to continue this. So I don't know the great workaround, But whenever I'm at shows, people are buying them like crazy. So, clearly there are people out there who wanted to get these things, and their local stores aren't getting them for them. But they'll show up and they'll get it when they can get it.
Erik, you added an editor to Savage Dragon relatively recently, and I wonder what the role of the editor is in your world.
He's essentially a continuity cop because he has been keeping one of those super into it fans who's a list maker who will go there and go, here's a list of every superhero you ever created, and here's what issue they've been in, and here's this and here's that, and it's just been this thing of me going, it's been enough issues now, and it's been enough years now, where I don't remember if this character is alive. I mean,
right.
It's just there are 250 odd issues of Savage Dragon out there. When was the last time this guy appeared? Where was this? What happened? I'm sitting there writing stories going, oh, it's taking place wait a minute, does Godtown even exist anymore? Where is Godtown? What? And then just, having so having somebody who can go, oh, no, yeah, Godtown, it doesn't exist. It dropped on Denver. And so Godtown is on top of Denver now. And if you want to do Godtown stories, it's Denver. And it's like, oh, okay. That's good to know. So there's a little bit of that goes on.
I was also interested in original art. I know that you're an original art collector, and I know that you have most of, if not all of, your Savage Dragon original art. Any chance that we see an artist edition of some Savage Dragon art?
I think Image calls it Vault Editions.
Vault Edition, sure. And also, is that like a separate house? I mean, 250 plus issues of original art.
That's a good question, Erik. Is there a way to pivot the camera and show us that the racks that you keep all that art on, man? That thing is. I seen some photos on Instagram, I think, and fucking love that.
I don't see the camera on my end, so I'm not sure what you're pointing at. What I'm pointing at.
I think we see a piece of it. I think we're being teased. Oh yeah.
Wow.
And the stuff
Yeah,
laying face
that's
down,
all.
that's the original art.
Those are 3 stacks there, and the stuff on the very top is that's the twice up art.
That's like
there.
Silver Age artwork.
No, that's not. That's my twice up art because I
Oh,
started
wow.
looking big.
Wow,
So
man.
that's Savage Dragon art. That's super, super gigantic.
That's incredible. You never got rid of a page, huh?
I know I have. At one point I started selling off complete issues because I don't know. It just at some point dawned on me that I'm going to go to my grave and I'm going to have all this stuff, and my family's not going to know what the hell to do with any of it. And also, it's like, you know what? There are people who actually want this stuff. What am I doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you holding on to all this stuff and that people aren't going to be able to? It just seems stupid to me at a certain point.
What are some prized pieces of original artwork that you have that is not your own?
I have a bunch of issues of Commandy, The Last Boy on Earth.
He said issues, ladies and gentlemen. Is D. Bruce Berry your favorite Kirby inker?
No. No. Mike Royer is my guy. Oh,
I cut you off though. You said issues of Commandy. What else, man?
So I've got the first issue of the Hulk that I ever read as a reader. I own the original art too.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's like a holy grail.
Who inked that, Herb Trimpe?
That was Sal Trapani.
Dig.
So yeah, that was a huge get for me. But like, yeah, Commandy, I've got, I think 8 issues. I think.
Yo, that's incredible, man.
And that's just, like all Grail stuff for me, because it's like I read all those issues. I love all that stuff. This is a big part of my life as a fan. And it's all this stuff, just mostly Kirby. There's a little Gil Kane in there, and just different stuff that I've liked here and there along the road, where it's just like, oh, I want to have a Joe Kubert cover, so I'll get a Joe Kubert cover that I managed to get my hands on. Oh, I've always wanted to have a Nick Cardy cover. I always like this cover. I think I've got the first issue of Superboy I ever bought. I own the cover to that issue.
We've covered most of my notes, and Erik, I don't know if you missed me begging you for a Vault edition, but
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things I need to get around to, but it's always like
that would be sick as hell.
There's always other stuff that it's like, all right, this takes priority.
Well, think of the joy you get from those Commandy issues. We would like to enjoy your artwork that way.
Yeah, we never got that speculator boom money, man. So we have to get facsimile copies in between 2 hardcovers.
Sorry, man. Yeah. Yeah, no, I need to get my act together. I realize that.
Is there anything that you're actively collecting these days, or are you still an original art collector? Are there Golden Age issues you're looking for? Anything you still actively collect?
I filled in most of the Captain Marvel adventures that I wanted. I think there's probably 5 or 6 issues of Captain Marvel's adventures that I'd still like to get. And there's a few other things that I'd like to get that I haven't got comic book wise. And I just, when I find them, and if I don't, oh well. For a while there, I was just getting a bunch of just random Golden Age comics just to have. Just like, I always saw, Daredevil versus Hitler. I want to get a copy of Daredevil versus Hitler. Just because, why the hell not? I could do that. I got the first Captain Marvel comic. I got Wiz #2 or whatever. I was like, I always wanted that. I could never afford that. And now I can, damn it. This is awesome. Life is good. But, it's like, what am I going to do with this thing? It's super, it's not a comic that I'm sitting here going, I want to flip through this thing. It's worth $10,000. I want to flip through it. Like, oh yeah, these things are super fragile, and that's not a good idea.
We've taken about an hour and a half of your time. Before we split, though, what are you working on now?
What, this today?
Yeah, like I'm just teasing you to get to the point where we talk Savage Dragon 250.
Yeah, I'm working on 249 right now. So that's the current obsession. I've got 250 is going on in the abstract that I had so many backup stories that needed to get done for it that I've sort of wrote a bunch of different stuff for a bunch of different people, and then all that stuff is pretty much in the bag now. So now it's all right. Well, what needs to be done on those stories, and how am I going to get that done? And so that's why I'm marrying the art right now to this thing, so I can have that be all together.
That's very exciting, man. That's a gigantic milestone.
It is. It's a decent one, yeah. I mean, it's a good start at this point.
Oh, you don't got to be humble. Don't be humble, Erik.
Whatever. I think a lot of people look at it and look at what we're doing and going, "Oh my God, how did you do that? I want to do 250 issues too." And it's like, well, first you go about it by not wanting to do 250 issues.
Right.
That wasn't the plan. The plan was just to do the comic forever, and it just happened to be that it was that many issues. But you just do it a page at a time. I'm not sitting here. Methodically planning out like years and years and years of stuff. You just kind of do, okay, in order to get here, I just need to do a page. Concern yourself with drawing a page. Okay, I can do a page. A page seems like I can handle that.
Yeah.
And that, and it becomes that much less formidable. If you're thinking about it as a million issues, like, oh, that just seems like it's overwhelming. Like, I can't possibly do that. That's way too much work. But if you're sitting there going, I want to do, 3 pages of my own character, can I do that? It's like, all right, now that I've done that, can I do 3 more? And just do it like that, where you're just sitting there bit by bit by bit, getting to this place where you want to go, but you're not, you know what I'm saying? It's
definitely.
You
You're
not sitting there going, I want to climb to the top of that mountain. You're just like, I want to get to where that mountain is, and then just take a look at that mountain, see what that's all about.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it, because the other way to put it would be almost like the cartoon version of that, which you just showed us that stack of finished artwork from the bibliography of Savage Dragon. So that's the to-do pile, and then you have page 1. You know what I mean?
Well, that's I'm sitting here every goddamn month, going, how am I going to get through this issue? How the hell am I going to do it? And it really is every single month. It's not like suddenly it's like, oh, it's easy now.
Right.
It's never easy. It's always like, because what ends up happening is I end up going, well, I've done that before. I've done that same kind of story before. I've done that same kind of issue before. I don't want to be just repeating the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm gonna find some different approach, some different way of doing this. And then that becomes like, well, how the hell are you gonna do that? Because you have done, because I have done a million different things before. So how do I find a different approach every single time, forever?
I don't know about forever, but you could do the silent interlude wordless issue.
Yeah, but
Shut.
I actually kind of felt like I scratched that itch on the Defenders because I did a silent issue there.
There you go.
So it's like I don't really feel like I need to do a silent issue.
Erik, do you think about ending Savage Dragon or...
No.
Good.
And I remember young Erik Larsen being interviewed saying 301 issues at the very least because I got to do one more than Dave Sim. I like that piss and vinegar, man.
Well, I want to do a bunch, but if I could sit here and go like I want to do, if I could do 500 issues, I'd be like, oh, that'd be awesome.
That's what I'm bracing for, man. And that was going to be the sign off. Like, here's to another 250. But you know how I think I'll sign it off this time? I'll sign it off by telling you that Jim and I have no hard feelings that you didn't choose our villain in Savage Dragon number 10 to go up against the dragon. You chose that little SpongeBob SquarePants crab guy, and that's okay. Like, I don't have hard feelings about that.
I actually hear this a lot. Yeah, it's one of those like I couldn't use everybody's character. I couldn't do that. As fun and cool as that would have been.
One of the all-time greatest gimmicks ever. That contest.
we all participated, man.
That's cool. Can't imagine how much a bunch of people did. It was definitely fun thing to try, and I think some people got the gist of it and could see the fun in it and made the most of it. And to those who didn't get selected, tough shit, man.
I thought that was going to be my break-in, man. I was watching the mailbox every day, but I built up scar tissue. Don't you worry.
Yeah, it's all good for you, man.
Hey, man, I don't remember that guy's name. I don't know if he's in the game now, and we're sitting here talking to you for like 2 hours.
As far as I've been able to determine, he is no longer with us.
Oh man, that sucks. Rest in peace.
Yeah, because I know at one point there was some dragon guys who were like, oh, let's find this guy and interview him for the Savage Fin cast. Let's do that. And then I think the people tried to look him up, and it was like, yeah, he passed away some years ago. And so, that the character is, I guess owned by his heirs, his parents, I don't know who, and it's like, shit happens, and it doesn't always happen the way you want it to happen.
Man, rest in peace. And I wanted to end on a nice little joke.
Sorry about that.
Well, wrapping up, Erik, where should people follow you? I know you're active online. Do you want to throw out any social media or anywhere people should look for you?
I'm on. There's SavageDragon.com exists as a thing. I'm on Facebook. It's just whatever, Erik Larsen. There's a picture of me that's I use on all my social media stuff. I think I'm Erik J. Larsen on Twitter. I think it's that. Maybe Erik John Larsen. I don't know, but it's a lot of spelling trial and error for you to find me on that. Because I've got the least popular spellings of all three of my names. It's like, hey, it's Erik with a K, John, Jon, and then Larsen with En. Like, holy crap, man, you're not making it easy.
You're iconoclastic.
It's like, let's do this full-on Danish style. It's like, so I think I'm Erik J. Larsen on Twitter. And then I'm just whatever. I'm on Facebook. Everybody's on Facebook.
We'll surely include links in the description below the video so that people can stay in touch, so that everybody can know whenever you have new books coming out. Or stock.
Yeah,
depends on the.
I'm continuing to put out comics, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So, there'll be more of that. I promise.
That's awesome, man. Jim, you got anything else?
That's all.
Eric, thanks a lot for your time. Much appreciated.
And thank you for making Image. The impact that's had on generations now can't be overstated. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Yeah, I was happy to do it. Yeah, it's been great fun, and it's been really neat seeing just the different people who've come along and have been inspired by it and wanted to do their own thing and make something cool out of that. It's like, yeah, that's really what this was all about, was giving people a home so that they could do their own stuff. It's like, I'm all for it. I want to see more awesome comics. So please, if you've got it in you, do something for me, man. I want to see it.
I hear you.
I want to see more cool shit,
No doubt.
And it's like, it's frustrating to me that not enough people are doing that and are taking that kind of plunge and coming up with something. It's like, I want to see your Savage Dragon. I want to see everybody's. I want to see that thing that you just have to do, even if you're not making a nickel doing it. I want to see that from everybody.
That's a good way to leave this, Eric.
All right.
That's a good wrap up, man. Thanks a lot for your time. Keep on plugging.
All right, will do.